All right. I think everyone can see and hear. Yes. All right. Well, I'm Donna,
And I'm Julia.
and we are both RN psychotherapists, and we work at TriHealth, as Samantha said. Our expertise really is around mental health and mental health counseling. We both provide sex and couples therapy to a wide variety of clients, adults from 20 to I have some clients, well, I do have clients that are 80. so wide spectrum there. As nurses, we do have general information about Parkinson's, but that is not really our expertise. But we do have that knowledge. So today I wanted to just first of all mention that when we talk, as Rebecca said, we are being recorded. However, we're talking about intimacy and relationships, so we want people to feel safe asking questions, which we'll do at the end, and we will share the notes or the PowerPoint presentation. But do remember that we hope this is a confidential space. So our agenda for today looks like we're going to talk about some common psychological and relational challenges that come up when people are having a chronic debilitating illness, such as Parkinson's disease. We're going to talk a little more specifically about sexual challenges, and nurses are practical people, what you can do about it. So that's kind of where we're at for that. And I'm just sort of navigating away here. There is quite a crossover between Parkinson's and mental health. 50% of people will develop depression and anxiety along with their Parkinson's. And it can show up at any stage. And so if there are signs of depression, recommendations are really to treat that as you would treat anybody else with depression and anxiety. So those are very common, and both of those can affect your relationship. So there's almost like two or three things going on as far as mental health is concerned. Apathy is that internal motivation that can be decreased interest or decreased initiation or curiosity, less goal focused, perhaps. So those can be things that show up as well in a relationship and really affect that. That's when people say things like, well, they just don't seem to care, or they don't care about that anymore. But it's also an internal feeling of, I just can't be bothered with that, or it's not a priority. Maybe not even thinking about what the priority is. So all of those mental health components can show up with that. So depression and apathy can decrease interest in relational intimacy, and sometimes it's a harder time expressing it, a harder time feeling it. But once you get started, things might be fine. So that initiation piece is something to kind of keep your eye on. Is that the issue, or what's behind that? Also, negative thoughts about self, which come up with depression and anxiety. Feelings of not feeling very good about yourself, not feeling like a good partner. And that can come up with both a care partner role and the person with Parkinson's, because they sort of show up differently, feeling like a burden, feeling like I'm not holding up my end of this bargain in this relationship. Some of those things really affect, or feeling of resentment. Why has this happened to us? And so those things can be affected by depression and anxiety. Sometimes it's avoidance of social situations as things become more difficult to socially interact, or mobility becomes an issue. There's always the risk of isolation, and that can be something that shows up more like anxiety. I don't want to go out and don't want to have to manage in a spot that might be difficult. I would say fatigue, that tiredness that comes in, can also affect your personal relationship, the energy you have to bring to the relationship physically and emotionally. Sleep is a common issue, side effects of medication and the timing of medication with times that you need to rest and sleep. And then communication changes around ability to express yourself and be able to sort of think and connect that to words in a conversation can be affected as the disease progresses. Yep, there we go. I know when we're thinking about that whole who are you living with, loving and interacting with family members, and you sort of alluded to this in your sort of introduction, that anticipatory grief, that fear of the unknown, fear of the future, losses as they come along, which might not be so evident early on in the illness, but become more evident as you go along. So that coping with losses. Um, and it may be, we're going to talk a little more about that, so I won't get too much into that. That's part of yours, Julia. Adapting to new roles as both a care partner and somebody receiving care. That really sort of changes your role dynamic between the two of you. Um, it can lead to feelings of overwhelmed. It can also lead to opportunities for how do we creatively care for this person, care for each other, I should say, and what are the opportunities for increased intimacy that could come up? I would also recognize there's going to be conflict. There's conflict in every relationship. But living with Parkinson's can be a stressful time. There may be anger, there may be fear, there may be a lot of strong emotions, and managing strong emotions is a challenge for all of us at the best of times. But layer that on with the complexity of all the medical appointments and sort of navigating, facilitating things in your home that are working for activities of daily living. There's like more complexity to it there. I also put in that there's, when it comes to the future, uncertainty about future, but there's also who are you living with? What are those living arrangements? There may be adult children that are living with parents for caregiving roles, or parents living with adult children with Parkinson's. You may be living with a sibling. So those all impact your intimacies in the way that you may not be as comfortable with displays of affection, or you're not going to wander around your house naked when you're with living not just the two of you, and there's other members of the family living with you. All right.
Okay, so next we're going to talk about some things that you can do to help navigate these mental health challenges, these relational challenges. And as we go through these, just know that, it's going to be challenging and it's going to be hard, and these aren't quick fixes that will make all the problems go away. But we hope that you can leave here with one or two things that can help. So first, get good at grief. And I'm so glad to hear that there's a whole workshop that's coming up on grief. I think that's so important because, even though we're not talking about death, grief is the grief of any loss. It can be a loss of physical function. It can be a loss of identity. It can be a loss of a certain relationship dynamic, right? And with Parkinson's, because it's degenerative, that means that there are multiple losses over time. It means that there's that anticipatory grief of, I know that there are losses coming that haven't come yet. So to get good at grief, because you're going to be experiencing grief throughout this process. So what does it mean to get good at grief? Well, one thing, even just recognizing that what you are experiencing is grief is huge, right? To be able to say, oh, I'm feeling grief about this loss. It's the loss of my identity. I used to feel like I was the provider of the family and I was taking care of everyone. And I was you have this whole image of yourself, and it can be this sense of, oh, and I feel like now that I have that's Parkinson's disease, that I've lost that part of me, right? So to be able to name and honor that loss. And then to be aware of the stages of grief. So Elizabeth Kubler-Ross came up with these 5 stages of grief. They are not a checklist. They're not prescriptive, but it can be really helpful just to know, oh, what's happening to me now? I'm in the bargaining stage of grief. So I thought I'd give a few examples of what these stages might look like in the context of Parkinson's. So denial. That might look like pretending like it's okay. It might look like keeping your Parkinson's disease a secret from your friends and family for a while. It could mean not asking for help when you really need it, right? It's that I'm not able to accept that this is happening, and I'm going to just pretend like it's not happening. There can be anger at Parkinson's disease itself, anger at the losses, anger that ends up being directed at each other. There can be bargaining. I can imagine the not so helpful friend of, oh, well, maybe if you just stayed physically fit, maybe if you try this supplement I've heard of, maybe if you, right, that maybe there's some sort of solution out there that would help us avoid these losses, right? There's the depression, that like deep sadness and despair about these losses. And then finally, acceptance, right? And I love David Kessler's quote on acceptance. He has a great website, grief.com. And he says, acceptance is not about being okay with the loss. It's about recognizing that this is our new and permanent reality and learning to live in this reality. Okay. So let's talk about learning to live in this reality. So say you're at a place of acceptance and you're ready to shift your focus from what you've lost, what you can't do, to, okay, what can I do now? How can I still live a rich and meaningful life with Parkinson's? So an activity, and this activity is taken from a form of therapy called acceptance and commitment therapy. So step one, think of an activity that you used to enjoy, but that you are no longer able to do. And the example that we'll use today is, say I have Parkinson's disease and I used to play baseball with my son, and now I'm not physically able to play baseball with him anymore. And and that's a huge loss for me. It's a huge loss for us. Then, well, what made that activity special? What were the underlying values of that activity? And then how can you incorporate those values into your life now? So let's go through a couple examples. Maybe it was your love of the outdoors, right? You're out playing baseball, it's evening, you're watching the sunset, you're hearing the crickets. And maybe you can incorporate that love of the outdoors into your life now by going for nature walks together, or even driving to a park bench in a beautiful nature area. Maybe that's not what you loved at all. Maybe you loved the competition and the playfulness and that like buildup of anticipation and we won, and the like laughing and jovial nature of it. And maybe you can get some of that by playing board games or card games, or, incorporate that competitiveness and playfulness into your life in another way. Or maybe you just love the game of baseball and you can enjoy watching baseball on TV.
Put your Blue Jay sweaters on and go.
Put your Blue Jay sweaters on and go. Yeah. So it's not easy. It takes a lot of intentionality and creativity and open-mindedness, but there might be ways to live those same values despite your new limitations. So let's talk a little bit more about the care partner role. And again, so glad to hear that you have some, like a whole conference on that care partner role and things that you can do. So a few little things here. One is treat Parkinson's disease as a third thing. So it's very easy for when a couple encounters a challenging situation and there's lots of big emotions coming up, for the couple then to start treating each other like the enemy, right? And lashing out that anger towards each other. And what's important to do is to remember that Parkinson's disease is this third thing, right? It's neither person's fault. You're both struggling with it. And how can the two of you come together as a team and meet that challenge as a team, right? You can imagine you're in a challenging situation, and instead of, directing that anger towards the other partner, taking a breath and turning to your partner and say, I hate Parkinson's. And they can turn back to you and say, I hate Parkinson's too, right? Another thing that the care partner can do is try to find ways to recharge and meet your own needs. So caregiving in and of itself doesn't lead to exhaustion and burnout. It's when our demands outweigh our capacity. So, are there ways that you can reduce your demands? Are there ways that you can increase your capacity? So, increasing your capacity, are you able to turn towards others for emotional support? Are you able to reach out to friends? Are you able to join a peer support group like the one that the Parkinson Society has? Are you able to engage in individual therapy, like the therapy we offer at the Tri-Health Clinic, right? Are you able to get that emotional support that you need? Are you able to engage in self-care, right? Getting enough sleep, physical activity, eating well, or having a way that someone else can care for you, like going for a massage? And then in terms of reducing demands, are there ways that you could outsource tasks? Things like mowing the lawn or cleaning the house or ordering meal kits, right? And if that is not available to you financially, are there people in your community who are able to step up and help? Lastly, role flexibility. So just because one partner is in the caregiver role the majority of the time, do they have to be in the caregiver role all the time, right? Can the person with Parkinson's disease express care? Are they able to express care through physical affection, like cuddling? Are they able to express their gratitude? Are they able to, be thoughtful, leaving a little candy and a little love note somewhere where their partner will find, right? It doesn't have to be all one-sided. And could you even make space for a date night where you take off your hats, you take off your roles, and just be a couple for a night? Lastly, just thought we'd throw in some communication tips, right? In couples therapy that we offer at the Tri-Health Clinic, there's a lot of focus around how to communicate, right? And so oftentimes with couples, when in conflict, we, myself included, react with things like yelling or criticism, blame, or maybe defensiveness or shutting down. And to take a lot of information and make it very, very small, our advice is, when in conflict, try really hard to focus on two things: emotions and needs. So an example I'll share, say a person with Parkinson's is having trouble finding their words, and their partner wants to be helpful, right, and finishes their sentence for them. And the person with Parkinson's reacts. They say, why are you always finishing my sentences for me? Okay. And that, one, it's kind of a harsh startup, right? And two, it's not very specific, right? We know that this person is upset. We don't know why they're upset, and we don't know what they're actually asking for. So instead, what if that person said, hey, when you finish my sentences for me, I feel frustrated and disempowered. I want to be able to keep doing as much as I can for as long as I can. In the future, can you please wait until I ask for help? Right? So this shares the emotions, feeling frustrated, feeling disempowered, and gives this really rich meaning of like, here's why I'm feeling the way I'm feeling, which can be really motivating for their partner, right, to understand why. And then very clearly asks for what they need, right? And this can be done either in the moment, or if you're anything like me, you'll have the reaction in the moment and then the next day come back for a repair and say, last night when I yelled, I think what I was feeling was this, and because of that, and like, maybe we can do this in the future. Yeah. So it's never too late for a repair.
Yeah. That's sort of the 5 steps to good communication as a couple that we often both use in therapy.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So when you're thinking about intimacy, there's often challenges and opportunities with a degenerative disease. So there will be Challenges are pretty evident. I think people kind of recognize those. And they may not be as evident at the beginning, but they do show up as it progresses. But there's also opportunities. And you can be vulnerable in different ways, and you can live in the moment more. You can, as your future is more uncertain, there's more opportunity for creativity and not taking things for granted. So I like to think of intimacy as a journey you travel together. That's my picture about the roads. But what is your definition of intimacy? If people want to just put that in the chat, if that's easier. There's not that many of us, so I'm okay if you want to raise your hand and speak as well. That's okay. What is your definition of intimacy? There'll be a minute as people are typing. Right. Does anybody want to raise their hand? Oh, Natalia says connection. Yeah, it's about connection. Yeah. And that's often when couples come to see us, that's what they're looking for. We've sort of lost that connection piece. Anyone else?
I would turn the recording back.
All right, perfect. Thank you. Our definition of intimacy is really more than sexual intimacy. There's several areas of intimacy, and these areas of intimacy are what make your couple relationship different than the relationship you have with friends or the relationship you have with family or that you have with neighbors. So what is that intimacy? A lot of it is around emotional connection. That's being able to have that closeness without feeling discomfort, talking about things that are you find are scary or that you might fear or your um, hurts, or sharing your dreams comes in both positive and negative ways. So that emotional intimacy is that ability to share. And when you get into a care partner role with your partner, that may change in your relationship. That vulnerability you may become more protective of, or those fears may be harder to speak to or speak about. So when we talk about intimacy, it's how do you get back to that sharing those innermost emotional thoughts? And Julie was talking about expressing those. Feelings are just feelings, they mean something, but they can sometimes be hard to express. When we talk about intimacy, it can also be a spiritual thing, that feeling of oneness, that feeling of partnership. It can be a belief in a higher power, whatever that might be, and being able to share that and participate in that with your faith community and your partner. There's also an intellectual sharing. That's that sort of really having ideas and good conversations and opinions. And that type of intimacy might be something that really attracted you to your partner at the beginning. So how do you maintain that part of your relationship that became so important, or that is so important? Some other areas of intimacy are around financial. You tend not to share a bank account with your neighbors. But when you're living together in a family group, there may be some sharing of financial, and that financial intimacy with an adult child or or a parent that might be different or at an earlier stage than you anticipated. So there's some intimacy that comes in talking about, all the hot button topics, religion and money and sex that we got going on here. Recreational intimacy is about the time you spend together. And with the case of Parkinson's, this might actually increase as the caretaker role increases. You may be doing more tasks with each other that you might not have in a different situation. I'm thinking about bathing, helping people with mobility. Those are some of sort of the physical or the time spent together. There's also physical intimacy, sharing the bathroom with someone else, sleeping in the same bed. Again, not something you do with your friends or neighbors. And then, of course, the last part that everybody thinks of when you say intimacy is around sexuality. So we have some more on that piece. There are, oh, that's you. Passing it over.
So we did want to talk about some specific sexual challenges with Parkinson's disease, primarily because people often don't share their sexual challenges with one another, with friends or family members. And so when you're experiencing them, you often feel quite alone in it. So we want you to know that sexual challenges are actually quite common, and that 36 to 87% of individuals with Parkinson's disease experience some form of sexual difficulty. So what might this look like? It could be kind of general physical difficulties. So muscle stiffness, tremors, mobility issues might just make bringing your two bodies together a little bit trickier. You might experience low desire or loss of libido, and this can be from a number of factors. It can be directly related to Parkinson's disease due to loss of dopamine, but it can also be indirectly related due to loss of confidence, depression, relationship stress, and other factors. You might experience difficulties with arousal. So that could be erectile dysfunction, that could be vaginal dryness and pain during intercourse. And these can be directly related to Parkinson's disease because of dopamine and also the autonomic nervous system. Also, I will note that Parkinson's disease might correlate age-wise with perimenopause, and vaginal dryness and pain during intercourse can definitely happen during perimenopause. And there are some really excellent, effective treatments out there. So please know that if you are experiencing that, do seek help. And there are some great resources there. You might experience difficulties reaching orgasm, which could either be directly related to Parkinson's, or it could be indirectly related. If you are taking an antidepressant, like an SSRI, one of the side effects of those medications is that it can make reaching orgasm more difficult. Or you could experience hypersexuality as a side effect of some of the dopaminergic medications. So if you're bumping up your dopamine, you're bumping up your motivation, and then that can kind of spark that hypersexuality or that compulsive sexual behavior. And if you are experiencing any of these difficulties, I mean, we could have entire presentations on any one of these topics.
Most definitely.
TriHealth Clinic is a sex therapy clinic. So please don't hesitate to reach out if you need support in any of these areas. All right, so what can you do in regards to these sexual challenges? So first is identify and challenge your sexual scripts. Now, you're probably thinking, what on earth is she talking about? What is a sexual script? So a sexual script is a belief or expectation that you have around how sex is supposed to go, how it's supposed to be. And these are often implicit. So we don't even realize, we just think that these are facts. We don't realize that these are beliefs. So for example, sex happens at bedtime, right? So in our culture, often in the movies, we see a couple goes to bed, they have sex, then they fall asleep. And as you can imagine with Parkinson's, you might think, I'm exhausted by bedtime. I have no energy for sex or intimacy. Therefore, we cannot have sex. But if you let go of that script, if you hold it more flexibly, then you could time sex with the times of day where you have a little energy boost. Right? A lot of people believe that sex should just be spontaneous and easy. It should just happen naturally, right? But actually, what the research shows is that couples who believe that sex takes work and they put that work into sex, they have better sex, more satisfying sex. Sex must include intercourse, right? when we say sex, often that's what people think of is intercourse. And as you can imagine, if you're struggling with erectile difficulties, if you're struggling with vaginal dryness and pain, you might think, oh, well, then we can't have sex anymore. But sex can be so much more, right? There's so many ways that two or more people can experience connection and pleasure and intimacy together. Only young and healthy people have sex. So that's not true. We are sexual beings across our entire lifespans. And a lot of experts actually believe that sex can become better and more satisfying with age. There's a certain sexual wisdom of knowing, like having a greater knowledge and awareness and comfort with your body. And sometimes, even when you experience the sexual challenges that come with aging, sometimes that can lead to creativity. So break the rules.
Break the rules. Exactly. Or be creative with the rules. Often what we see in counseling is people that have what they call desire discrepancy. I want to want it. I don't know where it went to, that sort of thing. But that desire discrepancy can be something that you work on. It's not that spontaneous youth, that youthful desire that used to be there. Desire can be triggered. It's something that when you go into it with good reasons and willingness to try and see what happens and have an open idea of what's going to happen. And that's part of that is following the pleasure. So we know that desire can be triggered. And it all starts with, what are your good reasons for wanting to have sex, to be intimate with your partner? What does it bring to you? What does it bring for the relationship? What about it do you miss? Often in people I work with around that perimenopausal, menopausal age, hormones are no longer driving for women that sexual desire. So what do you replace that with? You need to be more intentional. Need to think about all of the senses, because it's in the details of that mindfulness that you find desire. Often I talk about desire's there, but it's playing hide and seek. I don't know what it's hiding behind. It might be hiding behind Parkinson's. That might be the third thing in the bed that's really blunting your expression of that desire. So it's changing the way that you express it. And part of that starts with that initiation. How do you like to be invited to a romantic or an intimate interaction? Who's the one that normally starts that? How do you express that? And when your dynamic changes and there's more of a caregiving role or care partner role, that initiation may change as well. So having a talk about initiation and how people with Parkinson's show that desire with blunted affect. You may not have that sparkle in their nudge, nudge, wink, wink in their eye. That's how you normally knew. So what are those ways that you express desire, and have those changed? How can you express them in a different way? Perhaps more verbally. Perhaps it's what you wear to bed. Perhaps it's a hand rub or a knee rub or something like that. And it's also important to meet your own sexual needs, as Julia said. This is something that I work with couples well into their elder years. And after menopause, there often can be this renewal of sexual energy. So something to keep the spark alive, which is our next slide. So we know that Parkinson's and depression affect the same part of the brain. And those same parts are what often drive that desire. And then they can interfere in arousal as well. So there's some intention that needs to happen to sort of keep that spark alive. What Emily Nagoski, and this is a really good resource, you can Google her videos, but she also has a book that talks about Come As You Are, and there's one Come Together, which is how to keep the spark alive in a relationship so long term. But the secrets are pretty simple. Strong friendship and trust, back to those intimacy pieces. Prioritizing and setting aside time for sex and connection, like Julia was talking about, some of those myth busters. and touching without the pressure to have intercourse. So sexual touching, there's often this expectation and pressure and disappointment and frustration, breaking down some of their barriers. We spend a lot of time talking about that sort of thing. Another thing Emily Nagoski talks about is enjoy the intimacy you're having, not what you think you should be having or what you used to have. Really following the pleasure is the key. Pleasure is the measure, as Julia says, in this sort of area. All right. So when do people come to therapy for help? We would say anytime you feel stuck as a couple, and it would be helpful to have somebody to facilitate a discussion. What I often see, especially with desire discrepancy or desire differences, that people get stuck in patterns of no connection and avoidance. So it's kind of like the elephant in the room, and they're like, okay, how do we even go from here and get back together? And we have exercises and activities around that. What I really like about the sex therapy part of my job is there's pretty clear therapy gold standards and activities and practices that get there. So that's turning towards each other to seek that connection. If any issues of intimacy or sex are causing any distress, so you're finding that you're arguing a lot about it or you're feeling down about it, those would be times to reach out. And again, with the relationship conflict, there's that fear and that anger that are interrupting that connection and calm that you're seeking. And what we're looking for from therapy really is to identify and meet those relationship goals. Relationship goals are different for every person that comes through the door or through the screen, since we do a lot virtually. And communication is always part of the package, as well as education, because believe it or not, grade 9 gym class didn't give you everything you need to know about sex and intimacy. So there's a lot of learning there that's helpful. All right.